Hi. Today I want to talk about the collective unconscious because I see a shift in it. I see a shift in it. I see people thinking differently. I see a rise of awareness happening on multiple levels of society, but especially in North America. So, to give a better understanding of this phenomena that affects all of us, no matter where we are, we tap into collective unconscious. So, I'd like to dive into it deeper today, and I hope you will join me. Okay, so to start, we need to understand that everything is frequency. The entire universe, everything you see, everything you touch is frequency. And our mind produces frequencies, right? Every thought that we have is a frequency in itself. We have different states of mind that we can be in, which are measured by our brain waves. So we have the delta brain waves, which are pure unconsciousness, right? You are dreaming, your body is healing, it is restoring. It's that deep sleep that we need for restoration of our biological body. Applies to cellular repair, immune function, regenerative rest. And then we have the theta, which is the deep meditation. This is the state that we can enter when we are in dream states, like the twilight just before sleep, right? States of hypnosis as well. It operates on memory consolidation, our intuition, deep creativity, our sense of flow. And then alpha is the basically, relaxed, the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious, just lightly meditative, present, creative, Beta is active thinking, problem solving, alertness. It's the day-to-day focus, is decision making. And we have the gamma, which is peak cognition, it's insight, heightened awareness, aha moments is where you do most of your learning, your memory recall, your moments of expanded consciousness happen in the gamma. So all of these different brain waves collaborate and influence you depending on where you are. And it not only influences you, but it influences also your exterior, because everything that you do interacts with the world in one way or another. So the frequency that is in our thoughts, they influence our actions, right? Our habits. And then all that eventually builds our character. It basically shapes how we show up for ourselves and then how we show up in the world. And that shapes the world itself. The same can be said through people's thoughts, which affect their feeling, which in turn affects you, right? Everyone knows what it's like to be in a room with a person that has a bad temper or that is just having a bad time. And just having that energy around you affects how you behave. So basically, your state of mind affects the world around you. And that is basically the premise of the collective unconscious. Carl Jung is so fantastic. I started reading his work because I have always been interested in my dreams and the meaning of dreams. And then through his work, I discovered the archetypes, which helped me explore that. And then also the many processes of integration of the self that we have to do to lead to individuation, which is knowing yourself. I also learned from him the real magic of synchronicities. And then last but not least, obviously, the collective unconscious itself. So basically, Carl Jung said, in addition to our immediate consciousness, which is of a thoroughly personal nature, there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature, which is identical in all individuals. This collective unconscious does not develop individually, but is inherited. And until we make the unconscious conscious, it will run our life and we will call it fate. So that really changed my mind, this understanding that there is more to living than what we see, and we actually connect with people, not only individually, but the collective connects with us in one way or another. And this can be most easily seen through culture, as you probably know if you've traveled enough. Depending on where you go, you have a stronger or weaker cohesion between people's collective unconscious, right? A really strong one, and a story that I can share with you all, is when I lived in Japan. I obviously really loved the culture. I wanted to learn the language better. I wanted to just be immersed in that culture, which I loved. But it was really interesting to see the effects that the culture itself had on me, which I did not expect. Like, for example, I used public transit a lot because I was a real estate manager. I kept on going to different apartment buildings and seeing different regions and showing neighborhoods to people. And I remember being in one of the trains and a girl walked in and she put her arm up to hold on and she had a full sleeve of tattoos. And I remember that my initial reaction to that was just to take a step back and be like, oh my God, she has open tattoos. And then I had to clue into myself and remember that I actually love tattoos. Like, why did I have this immediate rejection to seeing something that in any other place of the world, I would have never felt any kind of negative reaction towards it. But here I was in Japan, in a place where tattoos are a little bit taboo. I was not born in this place. I was not raised in this place. And still, the collective consciousness of Japan of having that inherent negativity associated with tattoos somehow latched onto me. It was very interesting to have that happen. So basically, there's clearly a realm on the invisible plane of the psychological and the spiritual where we all connect in one way or another. Because of this, we have to consider all the ingrained and the invisible experiences that we go through as a human. The place where we were born matters. For example, it usually dictates our culture, our ancestry. Now, it's a little bit less with modern times and globalization, everyone moving around so much, but location can heavily impact your religious views, for example, which are often culturally inherited by our parents. Me, for example, I was born and raised in Brazil, where 500 and something years ago, Portugal arrived at its shores to inflict colonization, and the Catholic Church came with. So most of Brazilian society is raised through that colonization Catholic lens, including myself. Another thing to consider is that having access to quality education that teaches you creative and critical thinking is an enormous advantage. It broadens the limited lens of your pre-programming, much like travel does. And then it also gives us this different perspective to understand the potential and nuances of life. The more we expose ourselves to, not just psychologically, but even physically, the more things you do with your body and your mind, the more you expand your vision of what is possible, right? And that's kind of the only way that you can step out of these unconscious reactions, which is why it's important to be aware of all these many certainties that we have in life. We are constantly being influenced by many different factors. Most of them are biological, subconscious, automatic. We don't really have access to them. They just happen. We only know what we know, and then some of what we don't know. But we don't know what we don't know, and that is the majority of life. We really have to be aware of the lens that we see the world through and its limitations, because that's the only way to go beyond these limitations. And honestly, you'd be surprised at how that shapes your emotions, your feelings, your actions, and your habits. How you do anything is how you do everything in the end. I remember hanging out with this friend of mine who was having a pretty sad time after a breakup. And we were walking around town, searching for treats on this beautiful sunny day. And then she turned to me and she said, "It's like life hates me." And then I asked her, "Why do you say that?" And then she said, "I feel like crap, but the day is beautiful. It's like it's mocking me." And then I turned to her and I replied, "The day is trying to make you happier. The sun is trying to make you happier. It's trying to brighten your day." And it was like a switch had gone off in her brain. She just looked at me and she said, "I never really thought about it that way." So you can see how powerful your mindset is. You really have to be careful with your thoughts and how they control you, because, as Carl Jung said, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will run your life and you will call it fate. And I have found that to be absolutely true. So to bring unconsciousness to light, it's actually really simple. All you have to do is look at it. To explore your own within, there really is no better practice than journaling and meditation. There are many answers hidden inside you that no other person can reach for you. They can help you reach those conclusions. They can help bring some questions or some patterns out of you through questioning and guiding. But ultimately, only you can tell yourself what is right and what is wrong, what you think, what you don't think. You have to have the humility and put down your ego in order to observe these things so that you have an accurate assessment of what's going on inside you emotionally, mentally, physically. You cannot change what you refuse to confront. And the thing is that it's so simple that it becomes difficult. I remember initially when I was starting my meditation journey, I was just like sitting in silence, being present without thought. That can't possibly do anything for me. But in the end, I learned that that's kind of the point. You are regulating your nervous system. You are observing which thoughts pop into your mind from nowhere, which feeling comes up when you sit in stillness and you have no other external input. Stillness, silence, and presence actually do a lot, but it's not visible and it's not doing in the same way that we kind of think about it these days, which is like you have to be productive, you have to do something, you have to have some sort of product or object or thing at the end of whatever it is that you choose to do. So these things really do a lot, but they are not really visible until you go deep enough into it that you start feeling the invisible effects of your practice. But that's also when it gets good, when you start to understand the power of breath, when you start enjoying, envisioning, and committing to stepping into your highest self every day, your best version of yourself, when you connect to a force greater than your individual self, which we all collectively share, but few of us are tapped into it. Most of us are walking around automatically, running the day on unconscious habit. And this is our default state. It's normal. It takes effort and practice to step outside of our pre-programming and reflect instead of reacting. But ultimately, only through knowing our inner selves and our place in the world, we are able to have some sort of control over our actions, and through that, a deeper understanding of the people and the world that are around us. So, if you'd like to explore that a bit more, I have some missions for you. First one is to get yourself a journal, maybe more than one if you're like me, and then you find some prompts on shadow work. Journal about the influence you've had in your life since you were a child. What are some memories that stick out from that time? Just write. Just start writing about your experience with the awareness of how does the outside world influence me unknowingly, without me knowing. That is kind of like hidden, right? How does my place of birth, my social status, my access to education, my cultural paradigm, my parents' religion, my own religion, how do these things affect the mindset with which you show up in the world every day? You know, are you aware? Are you aware of how you show up in the world every day? This is what you journal about. And don't worry about making it pretty. Again, if you have to get to one to make a more concise, nice version, which is exactly what I do, and one which is just rambling. A lot of people do this practice that you wake up in the morning and 5 minutes, you just write whatever comes to mind, just get all of those thoughts out in paper because you can look at it. And another thing that I recommend is to use your hands, hand, pen, and paper. I know a lot of us use digital journaling these days, and it's incredible. It's really great in a pinch, but honestly, your thoughts do not exist in words. It doesn't exist in writing. It exists in images, in visions, in connections, in mapping, you know? So having a blank slate that you can be really creative on and just make all sorts of different visuals, it will help you process your thoughts much better than just simply writing them. But if you just want to do like a word vomit, which is incredibly helpful sometimes to just see what's in your mind, just go for it. Write everything that you can think of, and it will help you not only sift your thoughts, but your brain will feel relieved over not having to hold on to all that information. You know, our brains are meant to create, not memorize. And I know that this is one of the things that our society kind of ingrains in us through the schooling system, which is you have to memorize a lot of things. You have to know a lot of procedures. This is how things are done. It doesn't teach us to creatively or critically think about problems or looking at things from a big picture systemic way. So we have to teach that to ourselves, because life is a big picture systemic expression of all the possibilities that exist in the universe that humans create through our thoughts and our actions in the material world, right? I know it gets pretty out there, it gets really woo-woo, and that's why we have to be aware of our insides, right? Journaling, meditation, highly recommend. Get yourself a journal, start writing, and then notice your world change. I'm just putting it out there. Thank me later. Thank yourself later. Do attempt. Mission number 2 is committing to meditating every day. You do not have to start with a 30 minutes meditation. That is really hard, but if you can't do it, you are a badass. Congratulations. But the point is mostly to just show up. 5 minutes sitting and focusing on your breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. Keep on doing that. Set a timer, let it go. Every time that your thoughts drift, observe them. Quietly let them go, and then return to the breath. In, hold, out, hold. Do that for as long as your timer is going on. Every time you think about, am I doing it right? Observe that thought, let it go, return to the breath. When you think about something else that you have to do, you start worrying that you don't have time, observe that thought, let it go, return to the breath. Only stop this process of returning to yourself, returning to peace, returning to calm, returning to presence until your alarm clock stops. I find it's useful to use an alarm clock because you have something to tell you that the time is up. The best times to do this, after waking up and just before going to bed. When your mind is in that perfect location of drifting between sleep and awakened state. That's when you get the most out of the brainwave alignment of meditation. But of course, you can do it at any point in time. So yes, commit to meditating, just showing up 5 minutes, just sitting down and breathing for as long as it feels good to you. And the third mission. I know that I said a lot that there's knowledge inside you that cannot be found by anyone else except for you. And that is true. But therapy and professional help can greatly hasten this process. Either through guidance or diagnosis, you can find a path that helps you better understand yourself. So if you need to get professional help or find yourself a therapist that can even go through your journaling prompts with you, that can talk about the patterns that you find within your own exploration, that can help you understand yourself better. And if you have any childhood trauma or any other kinds of trauma that should be professionally handled, I recommend that as well. Because there is a lot about mental health that we don't understand. Like I mentioned previously, our societies are not really, the collective unconscious of our societies are not really equipped to handle mental health or mental care. Find a professional that has heightened awareness of collective unconscious things, like what are the influences that you have in your life that contribute to the mindset that you either need to understand or break or change or evolve, right? So I always recommend that you carefully select the people that handle your emotional and mental well-being. So that is basically it. 3 missions for you if you choose to accept them. I obviously highly recommend them. They have changed my life for a very long time. I've been journaling, I've been meditating. It truly provides a place of solace. When you go out in the world and the world is so absolutely crazy, having that inner self, that core of your being where you know yourself and you have awareness that you can step away from whatever situation that you are and observe it from a third person perspective with all of the understanding of why you're reacting this way. Why is this other person reacting this way? Why is society reacting this way? It really helps to provide perspective. So yeah, basically all I wanted to say in this video is that it's important to understand the ways in which this collective unconscious can affect us. But then more important than that is knowing yourself, knowing that your thoughts are your own. And that is one of the only ways we can achieve true freedom in this world. Awareness of who we truly are.